So we've just finished the California Streaming Apple event, the big annual showcase that they do every single year. I'm Stead from Finder. I'm here with Alex Kidman, Tegan Jones and Chris Jager. How are you guys going?
Good but tired.
Coffee.
The early morning thing for Australian tech journalists, it's just always brutal.
It's always an awkward time here, isn't it? There's showcases in Australia. I was adding up between us. We've got some crazy amount of 100-odd years of experience covering technology. So
most of that since 3 a.m. this morning.
Yeah, right. Well,
I feel young and springy now.
The big focus obviously was the iPhone 13. There's lots of things that they announced, but we'll start with that. Alex, you've got to get ear to the ground on the mobile scene like nobody else I know. So what was the standout features there? Any big announcement? What separates the new iPhone from the pack?
Well, the funny thing here is what separates the iPhone from the pack is the stuff that kind of has separated the iPhones from the pack in years gone past. They are largely spec improvements. So Apple unveiled the A15 Bionic processor. That's actually going to come in 2 variants. You get a slightly better one if you buy the Pro phones over buying just the 13 or the 13 mini. The Pro phones also get 120 hertz refresh rates. Apple calls this promotion. Everyone else calls it a feature that's been on Android phones for some time now. And better battery life, which in typical Apple fashion, they didn't say, oh, it's got this big a battery, just the biggest one we've ever put. And either an hour and a half or 2.5 hours of expected typical battery life depending on which model you buy and obviously depending on your usage. So it's a case of gradual improvement, but that's kind of to be expected because these are just iPhones, which are iPhones. Apple is not reinventing the iPhone in the way that it reinvented the smartphone all the way back with the original iPhone. And until it does that, I think this kind of incremental path is the one that we're going to be on for some time to come.
Until they do a foldable.
Even maybe with a foldable. Yeah, that certainly would change the way they have to think about iPhones and change the way they have to think about iOS. You're right.
Well, I saw some dialogue this morning from some journos talking about it as one of the biggest reveals or biggest movements in the iPhone range for years. But Tegan, do you think this is still a bit more iteration and evolution?
Absolutely. I mean, not to say there isn't some cool things here. Rip the 64 gig amount of storage. That is no more, thank God. And I also think that the variable refresh rate is pretty cool, but it should have been here probably a couple of years ago. So look, there's some cool stuff here, but yes, like Alex said, it really is incremental as per usual. Until we see something big, that's the way it's going to be.
Which doesn't mean it's not good. I mean,
not at all.
Some of the camera stuff they've got going, the rack focus effect on video, that's very cool. I'm really keen to see how that plays out in real life.
Yeah, being able to redo focus is so cool.
When they did the demonstration, like that film that was made specifically to show off that focus, it got very gimmicky very quickly. Like, I can imagine people might start overusing that tool a bit too much when they're making their own movies.
If you've got a cool new feature, you have to show it off 97 times in your video or you have failed. But yeah, you're right. Moderation in that kind of thing is going to be key, but having it in a phone is kind of new and interesting. And it does show where they've got that just kind of both end-to-end software and hardware working together and really good processing and good image signal processing all playing together to deliver something you can't get easily in other phones. But that being said, we are still talking incremental upgrades. It is still just that kind of classic story of if you've got a 2 to 3 year old or older iPhone, great, you'll see a huge jump from that. If you're sitting on a 12 Pro Max right now, I think you can probably sit pretty comfortably on that unless you are one of those people who absolutely has to have the new iPhone because it's the new iPhone.
Yeah.
Chris, mate, you've been writing this morning about which there's 4 variants of the iPhone 13 and which one is the best use case for which user. Kind of what have you picked up on writing about that?
Yeah, so as with most iterations of when they bring out the various models, like the smack bang in the middle is usually the best cost-effective one. If you prefer smaller phones, obviously you've got the mini. It's kind of like a throwback to the iPhones of old. Like you can use it with one hand, which is great. But and if you're really into photography, then obviously you go for the Pro or the Pro Max. And so I'd probably go for just the iPhone 13.
So the pre-order starts September 17 and they began shipping on September 24. I'm going to show the prices on the screen right now. But Alex, how do these prices compare to what else we're seeing in the market? I know Samsung's had an announcement, Pixel 6 expected to be announced soon.
Look, it's interesting. It's not exactly what we expected, and there's some weird bouncing around. So some of the 13 and 13 mini prices relative to last year, for example, have slightly bounced up, depending on storage, depending on model. The Pro prices are pretty much an exact transition, except, of course, for that 1 terabyte model, which is just frighteningly expensive. I don't know how many people are going to be offering that. And while I don't know for sure, I'll be surprised if the telcos actually offer that model. Historically, they've veered away from the highest capacity iPhones.
We've seen that with Samsung a couple of years ago when they brought out a 1 terabyte model and quickly got rid of it because it was so oppressively expensive.
Yeah, it was 2,700, I think, here in Australia, around that price. So that's the same as an iMac.
Well, and this is the thing. Apple says the iPhone is a premium line and the people who want it will pay a premium price. What we've seen in Australia is they're phenomenally popular and people, generally speaking, will, whether they do it on a contract or buying it outright, they will upgrade when they feel the time is right. The pricing is not totally out there, excepting for the fact that it's 2021 and some people might be feeling the pinch and think that, $2,700 odd dollars to pay for a 1 terabyte iPhone 13 Pro Max is maybe a little much.
One that sits in your pocket when you're walking around outside. It's a lot of money to have in your pocket.
It's worth noting with the new release of the new phones, they've actually knocked the pricing of all the previous models, so you can still buy them on Apple's website, but they're all, like for instance, the iPhone Mini, it's $150 off across the board to what they were charging yesterday. So that's pretty good.
That's true. And I suppose it's also worth noting that there's a couple of models, as they always do, that they've quietly killed. So they're no longer doing the XR. And all of you can get the iPhone 12 and the 12 mini, I believe, but all of last year's Pro models are gone.
You know
from
what
Apple.
I think that is? I think it's because there was so much talk around how comparable the Pro and the regular 12 were. And I think there's going to be the same arguments this year.
See, I don't know that they will. And it's funny, Chris, you were talking just then about how you'd go for the 13. Last year, I said, quite publicly on Finder, that the 12 was the phone to buy. It was the value proposition because the A14 Bionic was the same across the range. It didn't make that much of a performance difference. The cameras were good. It was the phone to buy. This year, I without having tested them, and this is subject to me having time to actually test them out, I suspect the 13 Pro, not the Pro Max, might be the model to buy, because you not only get the better cameras, but they've also rather subtly, even though they're both the A15 Bionic, the Pro models have an extra GPU core. They've got extra performance waiting there to be used. Given those price differences, that might make the 13 Pro the phone to buy. And Tegan, that totally plays into your point that maybe they're looking for that differentiation. They just don't want people to think about those older models. Sadly, though, that does mean even if other retailers have 12 Pros and 12 Pro Maxes in stock, they're not likely to drop the prices because they will have already paid Apple, for those phones.
Totally.
Well, while we're talking about the A15, I guess we should probably mention the new iPad Mini. It was also announced. So obviously the A15 chip, and that's some pretty big performance boosts there. What did you guys pick up on with the iPad Mini?
I'm excited for it. I have always been a fan of the Mini. So when it was actually resurrected a little while ago, I couldn't be more excited. But it feels like this is a little bit more modern now. You've got an 8.3-inch display. You've got the A15 Bionic chip in there. And it is meant to have a 40% faster CPU performance compared to the previous generation. And I think a huge increase in GPU power as well. Something like 80%. Yeah. Huge. So, you've got 5G in there. And thank goodness they've also got rid of Lightning on it this time around too. So it's been upgraded to USB-C. So I think it's going to be pretty cool. No home button anymore. So if you were a fan of that home button and you wanted it to stay alive, I have bad news for you. But I'm excited, probably more so than the other new iPad, but that's because I'm a Mini stan.
They've given it a screen.
There's obviously
really nice.
A bit of a focus on gaming there as well, because they showed off the new Star Wars Hunters game, which is also on Switch, but it's on Android and iOS. So it's not an Apple Arcade exclusive, but showcased that during a briefing, which is an online Star Wars game. Looked pretty sharp, looked pretty crisp. We're also seeing some performance boosts there for gamers on the iPhone with the 120 hertz refresh rate or variable refresh rate, and the processor speed improvements. Even the camera's going to be good for AR gaming, the camera improvements. Is there a big focus, you think, there on gamers with these new devices?
Yeah, absolutely. With the mini and also with the other iPad as well. Even in my briefing, they were doing huge focus on gaming. And actually, they were showing off some technology where you can use a certain app. Let's say that you're a streamer or that you're just a gamer with a big following and you want to record some of your gameplay and then you talk over the top of it separately, recorded, but maybe you've got a bit of a white wall background like I've got going on here. It's actually really easy with the iPad now just for it using that neural engine to get you out and put you on top of the gameplay. Things like that I think is really cool. So it's not just the gameplay itself, but content creation from it.
Yeah, Chris, is that a good use case, you think, to bump up to the pros, the gamers out there?
Sure. I mean, if you're a gamer on an iPad, I'm not sure how large that demographic is, but I think that if you're a really keen gamer and your device of choice is the iPad, then absolutely, I think the upgrade will be worthwhile.
Especially now that Fortnite has to come back to it thanks to that lawsuit.
Well, except not.
We'll see.
I suppose, yes, we will see, and money can talk. See, what interested me, really, the Mini has always been a little bit too small, but I agree, it's kind of interesting they've gone USB-C and they've gone the A15, was the upgraded iPad, because that's Apple's average play. That's Apple's affordable play, but they've still bumped up the specs on that. They've still made that a more compelling prospect without it being horrendously expensive. And this, I think, is a bit of a challenge for Apple because they've now got this really kind of divided line between the regular new iPad, it's still called iPad, the Mini, the Air, and then the Pros. But for most people, that regular iPad is actually going to be enough. It's going to do all the things you want it to do. Even though it's the A13 off the top of my head that it's running. So it's basically an iPhone 11 without the phone bits.
I picked up on that as well. It was the A13 in the new iPad, which was also announced at the California streaming event. But the pricing, from what I recall, was quite compelling. It was actually cheaper than the iPad mini.
Oh, way cheaper, and it should be. Yeah. Because it's not 5G, it's not the A15, you don't get USB-C. Now, I wish it had USB-C. I would happily wave goodbye to Lightning connectors for all time, but Apple is just slowly, grindingly making its way towards that conclusion if it doesn't go full wireless first anyway.
Yeah, totally.
All right, so one of the other big announcements was the Apple Watch Series 7. Tegan, you've been across this. What were the big takeaways there? What did you get out of that briefing?
It's interesting you said big because that's definitely like the biggest change is that bit bigger this time around. So we're actually going up to 41 millimeter and 45 millimeter form factor, so slightly bigger. But more importantly than that is that the bezels are a lot smaller, down to something like 1.7 millimeters. So you've got more screen real estate. It almost goes to the edge, and it can actually fit 50% more text on there now too. So they showed some really cool stuff that's happening with the new keyboard. So you've got a full keyboard on there now, which you can either type or you can do the swipe feature, which I'm terrible at. So I will definitely not be doing that. So yeah, that's the main things. It's a little bit tougher this time around as well. And there is not a better battery life. It's actually the same as the previous generation, but it has faster charging now. So I think it said something like 0% to 80% in 45 minutes. And it should just, charge that little bit quicker. But I would like to see a bigger battery in there because this is something that has been a bit of a bugbear with the Apple Watch previously. And there was all of these rumors that we're going to have this bigger Apple Watch Series 7 with a smaller chipset, all of this extra room. So why would there not be a bigger battery? And there's not.
And it's still a bigger watch.
It's a bigger watch, totally.
The fact that they haven't been able to get a bigger battery in there annoys me to be honest. And that's without having strapped one onto my wrist.
100%. I've got a small wrist. I don't want a bigger watch anyway, especially if it's not going to give me more battery. Like, I'm a heavy use case user though.
They did say it will fit all previous iPhone watch straps, so that's good.
Yeah, that is true. That would be so annoying. Got to keep those watch
rivers of gold flowing. Let's face it. That will be the last thing they change. I'll confidently predict this. That will be the last thing they change when they move, to a completely new Apple Watch. They will try and work out some way to slot those existing ones in because the profit margin on those things for Apple is insane.
If you're like a fancy man or a fancy lady where you've got the Hermes ones where you spent like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on the really fancy strap and you just can't use it anymore. Although if you're that rich, maybe it doesn't matter.
One of the other features I picked up on, Tegan, was the 80% brighter screen.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, it is a bit brighter, which does worry me with that battery life as well if it hasn't been improved, but we'll see.
Indeed.
Maybe that's why the battery life hasn't been improved.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's coming out later this year, isn't it?
So there's been no hard date placed on that yet, which is a bit strange for Apple. So rumors up until this point have been that it might be due to the global shortage of chips, which has affected so many industries in tech. So they have said spring, but we don't exactly know when. So that also means we don't have Australian pricing yet either.
And I believe you were in an Apple Fitness Plus briefing as well.
Yeah, I was. So there's a few new things there. So basically they're adding group workouts, which means that if you do want to exercise with someone, you can do that. So either directly through your iPad or through your iPhone or via AirPlay, you can have each other on screen. So you can be really sweaty in front of someone if you want and be a little bit competitive. Other cool things include they're going to a bunch of new countries with 6 new languages that will come up in closed captions. So it's still going to be recorded in English, but you'll get those closed captions in other languages. And there's a few new exercises as well. So ski training, which was really interesting to watch when you're not actually on a slope, as well as Pilates and some guided meditation.
I find the compete with your friends feature horrifying.
Me too. Like, don't look at me. No one needs to see that.
It's also, I think it's a great way to lose friends because not only does nobody need to see that, you don't want to be like giving it your all, stretching and straining, and you suddenly realize, damn it, Chris has done twice as many kilometers as I've done in the same time.
It shows you too. They have this little bar. They have a little bar to show you, like, if you're failing epically, I'm like, oh no. And that'll trigger my competitive brain too. So that's how I'll lose friends.
And you got the overly encouraging people who are like, feel the burn. And you're like, you're not my friend anymore.
If someone tells me to feel the burn, I'm going to like throw it across the room. Don't tell me what to do.
Apple will not provide compensation for sports injuries incurred while competing with your friends.
They're actually adding shot put, but it's like your phone across the room.
Reminds me of we have a problem. Remember that?
Oh yeah.
Oh my god.
So guys, any other closing thoughts on the 2021 California streaming showcase? Do you think it's a winner?
I think, look, largely it's incremental. Honestly, it's incremental. There's not some big wow, let's go out there and everyone must upgrade this year. It almost falls into some really old school iPhone thinking because those first couple of generations, it really was that TikTok thing of here's the new design. The next year we've refined it a bit. It's a bit nicer. And then the year after that, here's the new design. So
here's an S year occasionally.
Exactly. These could have been, and there were rumors around this, these could have been the iPhone 12S family of phones. Yeah. And I don't think anyone would have blinked if they had been.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. I think we're overdue for a one more thing. Like, they need to bring
I love that. I love that. It's like, yes, Tim, do it. Give me one more thing.
They will not do a one more thing until they've got an audience there to cheer for it.
That's actually very true. And I still think they'll do it for a foldable. Like when they pretend they invented it, that's what will happen.
That and the Apple car.
Oh, I want the Apple car so bad.
All right then, guys. Well, that's a very quick overview of everything that's gone down with Apple this morning. Stack of content on the finder.com.au website. I know you guys are all riding busy today, so I'll let you go. We'll get a heap of content up there for you guys. Everyone jump on the website, check it all out. Thanks for joining me.
No worries.
Bye.
All right, until next time. See you later.